February 19th, 2007. This is Diehard Gamer Radio, episode 21.
You are approaching the target of attack. Your mission starts now. Are you ready? The countdown begins. 3, 2, 1, go!
You are listening to Diehard Gamer Radio, the source for off-mainstream video game news and topics. And now, your hosts, Murdock, Brian, John, and Steve.
Just a couple more shots.
Wow, Diehard Gamer Radio is old enough to drink.
Congratulations, son. Here's a six-pack. Now go get drunk in the corner.
Well, welcome back to Diehard Gamer Radio. As always, I am Murdock, and with me is John and Brian. Normally we do our podcast over at John's place, but apparently Armageddon was happening at your complex, and it's being done over at my place today.
It was raining frogs, meteors were coming down from the sky,
Cats
fire
and
was
dogs
screaming
living together,
everywhere.
mass hysteria.
It was bad.
Yeah.
So it was some sort of fire alarm thing.
It's very exciting.
Oh,
we
yeah.
should talk about it some more, I think.
No, we shouldn't.
Excitement falling.
Yeah.
Right, like falling.
So the first thing we want to say is that it is our 1-year anniversary. I'm kind of surprised that we've been able to actually do this for 1 year without killing each other.
That's all thanks to our fan.
Yeah, it's also probably thanks to the fact that I do like 99% of the work.
That too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes it easier on everyone. It's like, well, Murdock will,
do it all. We
Just
just
showing
show
up
up.
for a guest spot each week.
Well, I guess so.
Yeah.
Where's the food? The drinks? Thanks, man.
Where's the Teamsters with my beer? So, thank you for listening to our podcast. Hopefully we will have more than one person listen to us in the future.
Don't talk crazy talk now.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves, man. We're
All we
only in
need
this
is
for
one
like a
more
year
person,
now,
and we've doubled our audience.
That'd be pretty sweet.
Yeah.
So easy in the beginning. We could double our audience.
The only thing that sucked about trying to get onto iTunes is that there's this huge queue of podcasts waiting to get approved. So ours is still
in one individually or something.
I guess I don't know what it is. It has to fall within iTunes requirements, whatever the hell that is.
No racial jokes, etc.
I put the explicit tag on our podcast, so we should be okay.
Maybe they just screen them all to see if there's any Mac-hating jokes in them.
Well, then they'd have like one podcast.
What do you mean you like Zune? Oh, you're so out of here.
You can find a podcast where someone likes Zune? Wow. That's amazing.
Didn't Gabe from Penny Arcade buy one?
Tycho bought one.
Tycho.
Yeah. Well,
I like the comic where he found the one other person that had it. Him and Bill Gates went singing.
So we are going to go straight to our news bits, and our first news bit is Atlas to bring Odin Sphere to the U.S. And this is a game which is kind of a pseudo-sequel to a Saturn side-scrolling / RPG adventure game known as Princess Crown.
I would have guessed Odin's Cube, but that's just me.
Yeah. But it's full of
square.
It's full of side-scrolling goodness and RPG goodness, and it is like polygon graphics and everything. So
it's like a modern, new age kind of game.
Yeah, and it's on the PS.
PS2?
Actually, I think it's on the PSP.
PSP, even better.
That system needs some games.
Yeah. So
it's been getting a lot of good games lately. I've been really happy with mine.
Well, yeah, in the last 3 or 4 months, I think it's done really well.
So moving on, our next news bit: GameStop cracks down on underage game sales.
Thank God for GameStop.
Yeah, because otherwise, kids would be like killing people, and
they'd be doing hookers and turn around and hitting them with baseball bats, and God, what's the world coming to?
Yeah, they'd be making out with teachers.
Would just be there snorting cocaine off their teacher's ass.
Talk about hot for teacher.
So, anyway, GameStop has laid down the law and said, Yeah, if you're not of age, not that there's any legal, backing on this at all, they're not going to sell it to you.
Yeah, this will last for how long?
I don't know. Haven't some of the major retailers already done that? I thought like Walmart and them have already had similar policies in place.
Yeah, but
I don't know.
I wasn't sure about Walmart
It's
though.
strict for like the first 3 or 4 months, and then new people come in. And they don't really follow the policies anymore.
It's actually it's strict up until like Black Friday.
Yeah.
When
I
they're
really
just
don't.
too busy to check.
Yeah. So next up, Blue Dragon to come out on July 11th, 2007.
Well, that's already released in Japan, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's just
Actually
how long
did fairly
they're
well
going to
over there
translate
too. Not
Yeah.
as they needed it to, but
Well,
decently.
I think
Well,
it sold
did
like
better than every other 360 game
Yeah.
that come out in Japan.
Well, that's not really saying much. So, yeah.
I don't know. Some would say that says a lot.
Actually, I don't know if that one did the best, because Gears of War had really incredible sales numbers in Japan,
I
too,
think
for a 360 game.
I don't think Gears was out before Blue Dragon, though.
I
I think it only gained popularity after it did well over here. Then they released it over there, and people started hearing about the fact they couldn't find it because it was hidden behind a door somewhere in the store. It wasn't actually out on the floor for sale.
They got that X rating equivalent.
Yeah,
like
yeah, that's the
stupid rating.
Z Zero rating.
Yeah.
Which means we'll have Z as in 0 American games for sale out here.
No, they'll just edit them to whatever the Japanese standards are, which is
A lot of green blood.
yeah.
It's nice that they aren't editing it, really.
Yeah. So next up, Triangle Service announces Shooting Love 2007.
Woo!
Now
That sounds really dirty.
yeah, well,
There's a porno and everything. You just gotta look deep enough.
I don't have to look very far for shooting love. What the hell does that means?
It's better than squirt and flirt.
I don't know.
so what Triangle Service was? What was this like? A year and a half, 2 years ago, Brian?
It
When they came out with Trizeal? Well, what it was
I think it was about a year ago, actually. I seem to remember like in February or March of last year.
It was this company that basically begged people to purchase their game, and they
went on the big
shooters
popular. They went on the shmup forums, and they appeased. They kind of tried to get. They just put out a basic letter saying, "Look, here we are. We separated from who we used to work with, and we're trying to do our own thing, and we'd like to get everybody on board with this. And we're making a game ground up. We've been in the market for this long. We know our stuff, and we want to get somebody that'll support us. We need to know that you'll support us if we can get the rest of the money together to finish this game." And a lot of people got on board. They were like, "Hey, this is awesome. If you do it, we'll count me in for a pre-order." And that was enough to get 2 or 3 major import companies to do it. I think NCS was one of them.
Yeah.
And they were able to get numbers high enough that they could justify a first print run, which is all they needed to do to get the game out.
So they announced X-Zeal, which is a sequel to Trizeal, and a mobile game titled Shooting Technical Skills Test, which,
It's quite a success story, actually. I mean, they're not, huge, and they're not some major powerhouse or anything, but it was such a weird way to go about trying to get people to see your game and hear about it and get word of mouth out there. But it shows the power of the internet. You can just get on it and talk to the right people, market to the right place, and people will, flock to your cause.
Hey, more power to them.
Shooting games are really a niche kind of thing. So
that's a really
just,
hard
just for
market
them to
find.
actually sell as many as they did was quite an accomplishment.
Is X-Zeal going to be on the Dreamcast too?
No, I think it's going to be a PlayStation 2 game. I doubt it'll be on the Dreamcast, as I think they're stopping GD-ROM production.
They stopped GD-ROM
They stopped
production,
it.
so whatever's left is all that's going to be available.
Okay.
Well, although it is possible to make CD-ROM based games for the Dreamcast.
Yeah.
Still.
So, next up, God of War 2, March
Word.
13th, 2007.
Bring it on, baby. Bring it on.
This is one I was surprised missed Christmas release, really.
I think
Yeah, that
they were
was
still
actually kind of a
polishing
little
some
bit
of the
of-
bugs, and I tend to wonder if they're waiting for like Gears of War to die down and the popularity of that to drop off just a little bit so that they could start their
And
own,
also, I don't think they wanted to compete with Guitar Hero 2.
This is also that time of the year where it's a dead market for games. There's very few things coming out, so it might be the best time to release a game because you're going to have more focus on your game.
I certainly don't disagree with, not releasing every single game in the world for Christmas.
Oh, jeez. There was enough games at Christmas as it was.
Yeah.
Well, I also think that maybe the game just wasn't up to their, whatever their guidelines are, and decided, let's
Just
work on it a
wasn't
little
ready for
more.
release.
Yeah.
The Nintendo syndrome. Hey, I'm all for it.
That's actually a quote from Shigeru Miyamoto. He says, a great game might be delayed, but a bad game is forever, or something to that effect.
Yeah.
But he's right. It's like,
can't take it back once you print it, huh?
Yeah. Once it goes gold, you're screwed. Unless, of course, it's on something like the 360 where you can just send out like 12 patches before the game's released.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, this fixes this and this, and you're like, what?
You still have to be on live to get them, though.
Yeah. Yep. I'm sorry, you didn't finish the game before you printed it? What was that?
So you made a PC game and sold it to me like a console title? What's going on here?
So, next up, Ikaruga, bound for Xbox Live Arcade.
Sweetness.
So,
Awesome.
Hey, Xbox Live people, I know you're too busy playing like all these games like Crackdown and your Grand Theft Autos. Well, here's a game that's like the hardest game ever.
Yeah.
Well, there's no GTA on the Xbox 360 yet.
Well,
they don't really have any shmups on the Xbox Live. I mean, with this.
Well, not in the traditional sense, but I mean the shooters are really popular there.
Yeah.
I mean, Geometry Wars was the first game on there and was the biggest, and it's a shooter.
Oh yeah,
it's a weird kind of shooter, but it's a
shooter. So this may just be like a test to see if there's enough of a market.
Try to see if they can grab that niche market.
Well, I don't know if Ikaruga would have been my first choice.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
It's probably just because they increased those Xbox Live Arcade download limits recently.
Well, that's true.
So now they can fit the game.
Put a bigger, flashier shmup on there.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if they actually charge a real retail price tag for it, too, as opposed to an Xbox Live Arcade price.
Yeah.
I don't see it being that much more. Maybe it's like a $12 to $15 range.
Oh.
There's been some $15 arcade games, but we haven't seen any of the bigger stuff yet. So, I mean, the best comparison we can probably make for it right now is Lumines, where you ended up paying about $30 to get the whole game and all the pieces for it. So I wouldn't be surprised if it came out at, $20, $30 as the price point for it. I wouldn't buy it at that price point.
I don't think a lot of people would, though. I think they've already made their money on Ikaruga, and it's just a matter of getting more of that game out in the market. It doesn't have to be worth, they don't have to squeeze another $30 out of people for it.
Yeah.
Well, there weren't a lot of people that bought GameCubes, and I would wonder how much overlap there is between GameCube owners and 360 owners. So
I don't think there were a lot of copies of this game pressed originally either, though.
Yeah.
Well, the American the company that released the American version, well, the people who brought over Ikaruga here in the States was, I believe, it was Infogrames/Atari who brought it over here. And the Dreamcast version didn't come out in this country, I don't think.
No.
I think it was import only. So, there's more shooting love for you.
Although Xbox Live Arcade is picking up some interesting people. Introversion, an indie PC company that's made some of my favorite games of all time, like Uplink and Defcon, has said that they've been looking into the download services, so I'm hoping some of their stuff will show up on Live Arcade soon. It'd be a good fit.
Yeah. This seems to be a good, almost like shareware setup for a lot of people to get games on, especially indie companies that can reach a huge market very quickly and very affordably. So, I mean, I've got to give Xbox Live props for that. They're definitely a good tool for marketing that kind of stuff.
Xbox Live is by far the best of the online services, so
it's the most.
Just need to keep pushing it.
Yeah, it's at least the best laid out. I will say that. And
they've been on long enough that they've worked all the kinks out and pretty much got a smooth running ship going. So Unlike PS3.
Wait, PS3 has an online service?
Oh, yeah,
I
wait.
think in the next update, you're actually going to be able to download in the background instead of having to watch the download bar to completion before you can do anything with your console.
And they learned nothing!
So, next up, Clover Studios becomes Seeds.
And you put water on them, and they grow!
So, most of the people from Clover Studios, they got reassimilated, reformed, whatever, and now the studio name is called Seeds, and I think it has most of Clover
These are all the people who
Studios.
just left Capcom, basically, after they closed.
Well, I don't think they left. Isn't this just a different group inside Capcom? Or
I'm not sure. I think Seeds is a completely different...
Okay, so this is the people who actually
I know.
left, not
I
the
do
ones who
remember.
stayed
I
with
do
Capcom.
remember some of the people that were of Clover didn't leave Capcom, but they were still doing stuff on the side. It's possible they're still working for Capcom, but this is just a side project and side company they're doing work for also.
Well, maybe this is the one where the lead designers that went off contract went off and formed this.
Yeah, and which is really good news because now we'll be starting to see.
I didn't have a
games.
doubt in the world that this wasn't going to happen after the popularity of Okami. Even though it was an underground game and it didn't reach Capcom's expectations, I just knew for a fact they were going to leave and do their own thing.
Isn't God Hand a Clover game as well?
Yep.
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, I can think of, let's see. It's Beautiful Joe, Okami,
I think there was another one too.
Killer 7.
Yeah.
No, they didn't do Killer 7.
No, that wasn't Clover.
That was Grasshopper.
That was Grasshopper.
Oh, okay. There was a fourth game. There was another one. I remember reading a
God
list of
Hand.
them. But in any case.
Yeah.
Still, great games, very underground, very misunderstood, and obviously not very much loved by Capcom.
Yeah.
Though Beautiful Joe is a good example of why it might be nice they're going off to form a new studio instead of doing sequels, because the Beautiful Joe sequels weren't worth the time.
Yeah, after Beautiful Joe 2, it's just like, yeah, whatever.
You gotta let it go.
Beautiful Joe 2 was more of the same.
Yeah, but it wasn't a bad game. I mean, it was a solid platforming game. It just wasn't really.
The first one
I know.
Got the same experience.
All right, next up, the AOU show. And for those who aren't familiar, the AOU is the Amusement Operators Union. Is basically a large trade show in Japan, showcasing the newest arcade games, but it also includes like pachinko and other amusement machines.
All the physical games.
Yeah, but we're interested in the arcade games. So some of the more interesting games that were announced at the AOU show, Silent Hill the Arcade, which is a light gun shooter a la House of the Dead.
That looked pretty painful, really.
Tekken 6.
God, why is it so hard to make a good shooting game?
Battle Fantasia, which is a 3D characters, but a 2D fighting game done by Arc System Works, which is Guilty Gear and the
so they're making the move to 3D.
Hokuto no Ken. Well, it's still 2D gameplay, but it's 3D polygon models. Dynamite Deca EX, which
loving
called Asian Dynamite, and Dynamite Deca is always the right answer.
Always.
Otomedius, which is a new shooter by Konami.
But looks like an old shooter.
Yeah.
Although it's got touchscreen controls for aiming, it sounded really unusual.
Yeah.
I think it was the bombing specific part of it. I seem to remember something about
I've only seen
bombs with the you'd touch it where you want a bomb to go off. And
I've only seen like a few. I think I've seen like maybe 30 seconds of video of it. I have not seen a lot.
Kotaku
had
can actually
like
post
an 8-minute long video.
Yeah, that must have been posted recently. I haven't had a chance to take a look at it.
It's fun. It looks good, classic like Proteus style.
Manic.
Yeah.
And then Mushi Mushi Pork, which is
much
the
more
new
excited about that.
cave shooter, which
that game would be perfect if not for the theme song.
Oh, the theme song wasn't that bad.
Is so annoying. I felt like I was in a 5-year-old children's show, and it just would not
that was
stop.
The point of the game.
No, not in a manic shooter like this. You don't.
I think it's like a
the
Proteus
whole game
game.
is like all cutified and everything.
A cute 'em up.
All the more reason not to do it in the music.
Hey, Cave makes good games. They can do whatever the hell they want.
Just turn it on mute.
Oh, and Cave, if you're listening, can you please let Miss Terasaki know where I live?
Good luck with that one.
Yeah, your secretary. She's really hot. Just have her call me. Yeah. Okay.
I think this is a good way to make sure that they never, ever listen to our podcast.
Well,
I just have a I just had a Harvey Berman moment. I don't know about you.
Yeah. Ha ha. So, moving on.
Dislocation.
Rumors of Eco team's new project. Now, and John, you can clarify for this. This is the same team that worked on both Eco and Shadow of the Colossus?
Yeah, same team. The lead designer has, previously said they're going to be working on a PS3 project, and this team recently put up a, help wanted ad for working on a new PS3 game.
What are the requirements for working for this team?
It was a very short ad. It didn't look like there was a lot of information there about it.
I think a lot of programmers are scared of the PS3.
I think it was, just good news to know that they're working on it and the team's still together and they haven't all gotten fired for making some of the best games ever that nobody bought.
It happened at Capcom.
Now, this team, I don't think the team has a real specific name. I think it's just part of Sony Computer Entertainment, right?
I believe so.
Okay. So, and as far as we know, the only two games that they've really worked on is Eco and...
I have no idea what the rest of their pedigree is, yeah.
Might be interesting to find out who the programmers are and see what else they've worked on.
Or where they've
I
come
do know
from.
that Eco was their first PS2 game because it was originally in development for the PlayStation, later moved to the PS2.
Yeah.
So any of their previous games would be PlayStation era.
Okay. So, next up, our last news bit, Bullet Witch, coming out soon in these states. I did some research on Bullet Witch for the Xbox 360. They have seemed to tighten up the controls, which was what I've heard a monumental feat.
Yeah, I hope they tighten it up a lot.
Really bad in the Japanese version. Added more outfits and supposedly tightened up the gameplay.
I got a feeling this might have a Tenchu syndrome going, where we might have done just a good enough job on the game. The Japanese really want to re-import it now that it's been fixed.
I really like the idea for this game. The theme looks like fun, the weapons look cool, but all the gameplay I've seen looks pretty atrocious.
Yeah.
Well,
such a letdown after all that work.
We'll know real soon.
Yeah.
I mean, the game definitely has some potential, but...
I'll bet on suck if they don't release a demo.
Strong words.
From witch to Twitch.
Okay, well, that's it for the news. We're going to go straight to our topics. And once again, it's fucking Konami week.
Is that where you fuck Konami or Konami fucks?
Well, something like that. As
Russia.
As we mentioned a year ago, when we mentioned fucking Konami week, we said it's always the week of Valentine's Day. And for this fucking Konami week, we want to talk about any other developer/publisher week we would want.
So what, for Konami week, we're going to talk about some other developer week?
Well, I mean, what else can we talk about Konami? We did it last year. It's like, oh, well, we love Konami. Here's our favorite Konami games.
Thank you for Rondo of Blood.
Yeah.
Ahead of time.
Yeah.
In advance.
Thank you for creating Cybernator, which was underappreciated.
Great game.
And thank you for Axelay, which I still consider a very underrated shooter.
Ouch. Definitely one of the neatest shooters, too.
Yeah. So, we want to...
that Konami even really counts as a developer these days.
Well,
really
developer, publisher.
Yeah.
No, they develop games.
They've got internal development
Well,
teams.
yeah.
Lots of them.
Yeah,
they're very large now.
But any other publisher/developer weeks that we want to see?
Treasure.
Yeah.
Treasure Week.
Treasure Week.
We could do it right around Halloween, maybe International Pirates Day or something.
I know the one I'd want to see. I'd like to have Sega start putting out games good enough I actually cared about them again.
So we could have like a Sega week.
Maybe we could start off with like a Sega weekend.
Yeah.
We just, well, since all their games have been crappy, we can do like shitty Sega Sunday and then work our way up.
What did you do to Sonic? You cut his balls off, you bastards!
Oh, I saw the review for it on X-Play on G4. Oh my god, that game looked painful.
It's worth watching the ending cinematic for the
I
game.
saw
because
that.
It's just so bad.
Well, not only that, it's just creepy.
Oh, yeah.
I think Sonic actually the downturn was when they had Sonic Shadow out and they gave him a gun. That was like, it reminded me of Batman Beyond when you saw Batman turn and use a gun. It was like the very end, and you knew it was the end.
No, I'll tell you when the downturn was for Sonic is Sonic Adventure on the Dreamcast. Even though it is parts of the game are very good.
I really like Sonic Adventure.
and so do I. But I think the bad thing about it was the fact that after like frantic level, you had to like stop, talk to people, do like a bunch of stuff that had nothing to do really with the game.
Kill the pace of it.
Sonic Adventure
it
really
killed the
good
pace
game.
though.
I think Sonic Adventure 2 was when everything went to hell in a handbasket.
Yeah, that's the best game. That's the best game that you didn't get to play Sonic in.
As in Sonic Adventure 2, then all the gameplay stuff just became repetitive, dull, boring, and slow. And so that's why I really can't understand why they can't do a good 3D Sonic game, because they made one.
Well,
all they need to make another one.
All they need to do is just do straight stages like they did in Sonic Adventure.
Can't repeat perfection.
And get rid of all the intermediate, talk to people, break the pacing.
I don't think
level,
that was
level,
the problem.
level.
I Sonic
the
RPG
action that they do in the Sonic game sucks now. If they added more of it, it wouldn't be any better. It would still suck.
Maybe they should just go back to 2D.
Maybe.
Worked for the Sega CD.
Yeah. Wow. It couldn't hurt. I mean, it's not like the 3D franchise is going anywhere.
No, it's going places like hell.
So we have
going nowhere fast.
So we have shitty Sega Sunday here.
Sunday.
So we definitely have a Treasure Week. Of course, I have a unhealthy love for Treasure. Me personally, of course, I would like to have Cave Week.
I'd like to have an old homage to SNK Week.
Well, SNK would work.
A larger one, but
I would have to pick some more of the. I think Taito Week would work real well because Taito is one of my favorite developers, and they seem to be kind of
the best power shovel simulation on the market.
That's true.
Well, there was only one other company that made one. Not hard to be the best.
That's still the best.
But
the big pushers of Komatsu also.
But I would stay away from the larger companies. I would do IREM Week, even though I don't think IREM's done a game in. It's been a while.
Well, it's been that long apparently. So we can't remember. Oh man!
Just trying to think of any crazy developer that would deserve a week. And insane developer that no one's ever heard of.
I don't know. At this point, it takes 4 years for a developer to make a game. So
yeah, that's true.
Who did Bangai-O?
That would be Treasure.
Was it? Oh, okay, never mind. That was one of my favorite crazy games. Yeah. Damn.
Although I will say this, I would definitely would like, and some of the older folks would really appreciate this. Definitely a week devoted to Technosoft.
Ooh, yeah, they did Urzog Zwei,
Old
didn't they?
Yes, they did.
Yeah, that was
and some of the most
some
pretty
awesome
ugly shooters.
shoot 'em ups too. Yeah.
Ooh, there's also Compile. Have a nice day devoted to the Musha series. The LS series, if you will.
Is Technosoft still around?
No, Technosoft got bought out by, I think, and Keegan will correct me.
Well, we have to put a certain number of mistakes in the show.
Yeah.
Keeps them coming back.
It's like Where's Waldo for podcasting. Find the mistakes. Well, Murdock spoke. Okay, that's one big one. I believe they were bought out by an amusement corporation. I think a pachinko company may have bought all their intellectual property, and Technosoft just kind of got absorbed by some company. I don't quote me on that.
Probably somebody huge like Playmore or something.
No, because if another video game company had their IP, then we would have at least heard about it. But we haven't heard anything about any of Technosoft's stuff
They
at
got bought
all.
up and shut up, huh?
Yeah.
I would buy a copy of Herzog Zwei 2 sight unseen.
Yeah.
Pre-order it.
Yeah. It could come on, like, I don't know, fucking punch cards, and I'd still buy it.
Yeah. And one last week I'll say, and then I'll keep my mouth shut. Telenet Japan
Jeez.
/ renovation.
Yeah, okay.
Or, if you want to be real obscure, Game Creative Staff, Wolf Team. For those who would remember Wolf Team, that's real obscure. I do apologize in advance.
Alrighty then.
Yeah. Any developer week?
I'd almost say, and I know they're not little, but Sony Week. And I hate to give them extra credit, but I really love some of the games like Tenchu. I think, Gran Turismo was just awesome when it first came out. Still is.
I will
loved
have to
it.
agree with you that the stuff that's come out of Sony Computer Entertainment, as far as their, I guess, first-party software, a lot of it has been very good.
I've actually liked a surprising amount of the SCEE stuff.
Yeah, and, they're not bad developers. They just work for a company that doesn't know anything about hardware, apparently.
Yeah. But don't let that stop you from buying good
I
games.
would actually argue that Sony is very good with their hardware. Their software just blows.
Well, there's that, too.
They've got engineers that know how to make stuff. They just don't know how to sell it or put an interface on it.
Well, what was it? I was reading an article that said when the Sony PlayStation 3 comes out in Europe, that they were going to have 30 games on launch. And the first thing that came to my mind is, wait, there's 30 games for the PlayStation 3?
Well, they're probably counting the downloadable ones.
They're counting the 15 soccer games that are coming out at the same time.
FIFA.
I don't know if they actually have
And winning
FIFA
11.
launch, it'll probably do better in Europe than it did
Oh,
here.
that's guaranteed sell for some people,
Yeah,
I'm sure.
Well, we have to watch Winning 11 because then it'll be Winning 11-11, which will be funny.
It'll be a lot of ones, at least.
Is that the 4-1-1?
Something like that.
The 4 ones? Never mind.
All right, enough
I'm
of
looking
this.
for info. Help me.
Enough of this, because we could talk about Konami for at least an hour.
I'm just looking forward to actually do that Treasure Week, because then I'll review Stretch Panic and make you regret it.
Never played Stretch. Well, I'm trying to think of a treasure game that I haven't done a review on yet. I think Bangayo.
Bangayo is definitely one we should do. Great game.
Well, you can do the Dreamcast version. I'll do the Nintendo 64 version.
Yeah. Yeah, I gotta get a copy of that.
Yeah. All right, moving on.
Lucky bastard.
So, our next topic, why do certain systems fail? And we're just going to give names of failed hardware and why we think they failed. And I was looking at some forums, and they were talking about dead systems or systems that were about to die, specifically the Dreamcast, and people just started wondering, well, why did the Dreamcast fail? Technically, it was a superior machine at the time, but for some reason it
didn't have the best marketing to start with. It was pretty
You
poorly
think so?
brought out.
Well, and I don't know if that was as much the fact that Sega's marketing was bad as Sony's marketing was really good.
Yeah. Well, like
That's
I said,
true.
Not the best marketing.
Well,
I think the timing was bad for it too. I think it should have waited.
really?
I do. I don't think the timing was right for Sega.
Well, the Dreamcast came out before the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox, right? It was the first one out.
Yeah. Yeah. The Dreamcast came out, I think, a year before the PS2 came out.
Yeah, I believe so.
And the Xbox was like a year after the PS2, I believe.
Yeah. But, I think as far as, on a technical standpoint, it was probably on par or possibly a little bit better than the PlayStation 2 as far as
It
raw
definitely was at the
processing
time,
power.
man. And it was
Certainly with the first generation games, the Dreamcast looked much better. By the time it was a year old, it was competitive with everything that was available for the PS2.
Yeah, and they
I
had
don't
even
think
pushed
its
the
peak
hardware.
power on the Dreamcast was as good as the PS2.
I think they kind of hurt themselves by having to create their own medium disc.
You think the
type
GD-ROM?
I think that kind of hurt them. I think because it cost a lot to make those initially.
It was probably cheaper than the DVD stuff that they put in the
PS2s.
DVD would have been easier to use, though.
Yeah, but at the time that the Dreamcast came out,
wasn't
I think
available
DVD
at the time it came out.
Well, another reason why maybe they should have waited a little while. I don't know.
Except then they would have had to wait a lot longer because, I mean, Sony took a loss to push DVD out with the PS2.
Yeah.
As they do with every system.
It's looking that
But
way.
I mean,
these days, but, yeah.
Well, what about, like, okay, so at least for the Dreamcast, maybe their marketing wasn't as good as Sony's, but I mean, I don't think, at least from a software or a hardware standpoint, there was any reason for the Dreamcast to fail. I don't know if it may have been the interface, if it was the control, if it was something more aesthetic.
How much was it when it initially broke?
The Dreamcast?
Wasn't it like $300?
I think it was like $299 when it first came out.
So it wasn't really a hefty price point. I mean, that was about right for a
new
system.
Yeah, the PlayStation 2 when that first came out, I think was like was
$300 as well.
I paid $299 on launch day.
Yeah.
But it didn't have a lot of games with it when it initially broke, like most systems. Some of the games are real niche too. I mean, it came out with a lot of fighting games, a lot of shoot 'em ups initially.
Well, actually,
that was what it did best.
Actually, it's strange that you mentioned that because actually, I think you just nailed it on the head as far as the demise of the Dreamcast. I think when Sega came out of the Saturn and they had this mentality of not wanting to bring over a lot of titles just simply because, it was not going to be profitable or whatever. I think they carried a lot of that mentality over to the Dreamcast, so there was a lot of titles that they could have brought out that would have at least added to their software library, and they just never considered it, and therefore...
And it forced a lot of us to have to import games for our system.
I ended up having to import a lot of stuff on the Saturn.
Oh,
on the Dreamcast.
No, Saturn was the same way, though. I mean, I've got more Saturn game imports than I've got a domestic because there was just so much more stuff I wanted.
I think Sega was just like, well, Sony's pushing the whole 3D thing. This is what people want, and Saturn can't do 3D. Or
what about this, though? Did the Dreamcast fail in Japan? Because I don't think it was a failure there. I think it was just a failure here and maybe Europe.
It was still crushed by the PS2.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, but still, I don't think they lost their market in Japan. I think they just lost it elsewhere. And it's almost seems like it was suicidal to a point. It was almost like they sabotaged themselves because they didn't want to give us some of their best games, some of their neater things. It's like they gave us just a selection.
I mean, that works well for the States. But that doesn't necessarily work when we talk about the Japanese market. But you are right. I think what it was really huge third-party titles, third-party exclusives that were just for the PlayStation. I mean, huge third-party developers, which if you don't have that third-party support, you'll die.
And plus, the PS2 didn't really have any of those big licenses.
Yeah, most of it was just either little divisions of Sega like Overworks or Red Dragon. Was not Red Dragon, but Overworks for like Sakura Taisen and Red Company for Sakura Taisen and Overworks for Skies of Arcadia.
Yeah, but the PS2 also had perfect timing because they were coming out right on the edge of DVD. They were one of the first systems that could play DVDs as well as games, so they had a dual compatibility. I mean, they really had that was a big bonus for them.
Yeah.
And they had huge memory cards. I mean, 8 megs. I mean, that was just phenomenal.
Yeah, you didn't need two CR 2032s to make sure that your
plus they were almost
Dreamcast
completely
die.
backwards compatible with their original system, and that's such a big bonus when you've already got a huge library of original games and you just don't want
true.
There's also start over.
The whole dual analog control thing, which makes entire genres possible, and the Dreamcast didn't support that.
Another reason why I like Gran Turismo, that DualShock was literally designed for Gran Turismo, and it served it well.
Although I think bringing up the Saturn is a good point there, because I do have to wonder if the failure of the Saturn didn't hurt the Dreamcast. And there were a lot of companies
I think the brand loyalty definitely died.
Yeah.
Right after
it ended before it started.
Well, actually, if we want to be real specific, I think the brand loyalty for Sega really died right around the Genesis. And then it just went from a downward spiral from there. And I think a large part of it had to do with the fact that Sega would not come out with a new system. They were delaying the release of their 32-bit system. And not only that, but they added just all these useless attachments to the Genesis to extend its life, and it didn't add really any value to it. They added the CD.
They thought the CD would do it. Yeah, the 32 was more like the Nintendo system, the Red system, the Game Boy.
Oh, you mean the Virtual Boy?
Virtual Boy, yeah. It was kind of like the Virtual Boy of the Genesis setup, and it was really the ugly redheaded stepchild.
But I mean, none of those attachments really got enough games to make them a good investment.
No.
And not only that, but at the time that they came out, the Sega CD was really expensive.
Yeah.
I mean, it was obnoxiously expensive.
I think that's why they came out
and
with
the 32X
that
wasn't that cheap either, and it was also really, really flaky as far as hardware.
That's where the Genesis 2, or was it the Genesis 3 that came in, where you had the full pack-in with the 32 and the CD?
It was
the Genesis 3 built into it.
The Genesis 2 was the one that had the CD attachment to the side as opposed to the one beneath it.
Yeah.
And then you could plug in the 32X on top of that, but you still needed like 3 AC adapters for it.
Yeah.
Because you needed one for the 32X, one for the CD, and then one for the Saturn. Which is nuts. Yeah. And I think
you could tell it was definitely
people
not
just got
planned.
really
It was
irritated with
just
it, and then when the Saturn came out, and the Saturn came out like 400, and it had 6 games for like a year, and they didn't support it at all, and people were like, well, when the Dreamcast came out, it's like, well, screw this. Why bother? I mean, you couldn't do anything with the Saturn, so I think they lost a
People
lot.
had already been burned by the Saturn, so it set them up for the Dreamcast.
And the developers were burned by the Saturn, too.
Well, the Saturn was just really, really hard to program for.
Well, and also, I mean, Sega just yanked support out from under the developers, and games that were in progress. And Sega dropped their entire catalog of Saturn games just all at once. And it's like all the third-party developers looking around like, is this really a system we can release a game on anymore?
Yeah, and which is a shame because the Dreamcast is a great system. But what other hardware failures can we talk about? I mean, the Virtual Boy is kind of obvious. Shades of Red.
The PSX. That was a big flop.
But the PlayStation 1?
No, the PSX. That was the one that came out after the PS2. It was a $1,000 system it was supposed to be a whole entertainment setup.
That was the DVR combined with the PS.
Yeah.
Oh.
The huge block system that just failed horribly.
That wasn't even really a system.
That wasn't. Yeah,
that's just like bundling a DVR.
Yeah, but it was a major failure for Sony. It was just another one of their major blunders because they expected people to drop a lot of money, and people just don't have that kind of money.
Well, I think
not enough people to make a difference.
I think a large part of the hardware failures, I think a lot of it has to do with the price point. 3DO.
3DO, yeah.
3DO being the prime example. I mean, when it first came out, $699 when it first came out, and that was the Panasonic version. That was not the Gold Star version that later came out. I mean, not a lot of developers. I think it was like EA.
Yeah,
that was it.
That was it. They had one or two indie developers.
Yeah,
weird games that were like, like movie. They were like novels on video games. Like Snow Job, and I think that was 3DO themselves that did those too.
Yeah.
You could probably call every portable system that isn't made by Nintendo a failure. And they just
I definitely like the Wonder Swan. That was but it was more of a simple system. I wouldn't say every system because the GP
PSP
is still coming out.
doing okay. It's not doing as well as I thought it was going to do, but Nintendo's the 800-pound gorilla here.
But I mean, it's had 90% market share for forever. I mean, all through the Game Boy line.
Yeah,
the GP32 is still around. In fact, they just released a new system for that, and I think they're surviving only because
it's market share. Though.
No, but I think it's made more for the underground. It's only survived because it's not really seen as being competition.
All right, well, Brian, would you consider, say, like the Neo Geo failed hardware as far as
Pocket?
Well, The
Yeah,
Pocket, well,
I
the
would
Pocket, yes,
uh,
I would say, because
To me, I wouldn't say it was a failure because I still enjoy it. I enjoy the
Well,
group
yeah.
of games.
A failure for you.
Well, it wasn't a failure for the SNK fan because there was a wide variety of games on there from the SNK library. It was like a miniature version of the SNK library. I would have liked to see more things like shoot 'em ups on there. But in the most part, I still enjoy my system. Overall, I'd say it probably was a failure because it didn't have a huge amount of support. There weren't a lot of companies that could make games.
I think
for it or
SNK
weren't
was
making
like
games
pretty
for
much
it.
the company that was making like 90% of the software for it.
Yeah, and I think
They
the
didn't have a
timing
lot
was
of
wrong for that
third-party.
system too. It was well designed, but it just didn't appeal to everybody. And I think you really have to make a system that appeals to a large market.
It was also competing against the Game Boy.
Yeah.
It was another niche market system, and it just didn't last because of it.
Okay, so what about something like, say, the TurboGrafx 16?
That never got much traction here in the States, but I have no idea how it did in Japan.
It did really,
did
really
really
well in
well,
Japan.
yeah.
The PC Engine was
Huge.
huge.
They
So that's
made
just
about
one that they
6
just
or 7 systems from it.
didn't manage to export, really.
Well, I think with the TurboGrafx 16, I think part of it was that the TurboGrafx 16 came out around the time of the Genesis and the Nintendo and the Super Nintendo, and it was kind of a weird. It was like the black sheep of all the three systems. I mean, it had things that it did really well that the other systems couldn't, but it still struggled on a couple other fronts that the other systems excelled at.
They had some ingenuity too. I mean, the
I mean,
four-player adapter was cool. The
it was a
power
really-
supply was
It's a
separated.
really
with a brick.
bizarre system, though. It doesn't fit with the other systems. It doesn't fit into like a nice little.
I don't think people ever accepted the games on a card concept either. I
Well,
think that was such a weird thing. I mean,
I-
when
I
you were
don't-
getting games in huge cartridges and you moved
think
to a CD
you
platform,
think it was just more of just like a value thing?
I don't think it appealed to a lot of people because of the design, and it's too bad because I think it was well designed, but I don't think the marketing for it was right.
Huh.
I think a lot of these things have to do with just the timing. I think they're poorly timed because of technology changes in a heartbeat. And it's like Nintendo, I don't know how they survived so long making cartridges. And I think that was the downfall of the N64 is Nintendo failed to move to CD when everybody else was doing it.
Well, I
Well,
mean,
everybody else was Sony.
Yeah, but I
here's-
mean, that's just it, though. You can't let everybody else lead the pack or another person. You've got to jump in front and take that.
The thing with the Nintendo 64 was that at the time that the Nintendo 64 came out, Nintendo's stance at the time was that they did not feel that CDs were a conducive format for video gaming. They didn't like the load time. They didn't like the how fragile the CDs were, and that was their opinion at the time. However, you end up with these carts.
$60 and $70
Yeah,
cards.
$60, $70 carts.
They have a limited memory built inside of them.
Yeah, and granted, that definitely did not help with the Nintendo 64 as far as getting developers to it and getting games. But the strange thing about the Nintendo 64, and we may have to talk about this a little more, is that although the Nintendo 64, for all intents and purposes, is a failure of a system, it has probably some of the most influential games ever made that literally changed gaming.
Yeah.
I mean, before, and you can argue with this or not. I firmly believe that before Super Mario 64 came out, developers had absolutely no idea how to move characters or do things within 3D space. And I think that one game alone just
that was
changed
pretty
gaming.
revolutionary, yeah.
And like Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, I mean, before that game came out, I mean, there was no template for how these games should be designed, and they're like,
some
hey,
pretty
It was
wacky,
the birth of the 3D platformer. It was the first one.
There's some pretty wacky things
GoldenEye.
on there too.
Yeah.
GoldenEye was
First
great.
FPS
Sin
on
and
a
Punishment
console.
was such a wacky game.
yeah,
I mean, they released Bubsy on there.
Well-
I mean, that was kind of let loose and hey, screw it. Here's a wild and crazy game
but
that has no
for,
limits.
for as weird,
But
yeah,
yeah.
the failure of the Nintendo 64 is it's a really strange dichotomy because even though it failed in a system, it excelled as as a means of showing I guess from a game designing standpoint, it showed this is how you do the games.
Yeah.
I think it's been continually showing, I mean, as we watch the N64 and the GameCube and now the Wii, that Nintendo makes really good games. And they know how to make software.
And they
know
make
how to
almost
make ones
indestructible systems, too.
Well, but
that was one of their major things.
Well,
They made
I
systems
think
that didn't
durability
crap
of
out.
systems.
Yeah.
Well, but it's also the whole thing is they're not actually that good at making hardware.
No.
It's that they're not pushing the edge. They're not leaping on these bleeding edge technologies. They're doing what they do really well.
They do what they know is guaranteed. Things they can. It's not going to take a huge risk for them. It's not going to break the
Wii
bank
is
either.
a pretty big risk.
I don't think it was. I think once they had the technology down for how the Wiimote worked and how it responded to things,
it was a big risk because nobody had done it before.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how good an idea it was.
No,
they
but
didn't
I'm saying,
know how it was going to go
being
over.
in their footsteps and playing with this thing and seeing how well it worked. I think they knew they had something, and they just had to carefully bring it to the market and find a use for it.
I'm going to have to disagree with that because I think Nintendo had an idea of how they would want people to react to it, but I don't think they could have even predicted the type of response that they got for the Wii. I think that totally caught them off guard because they can't keep systems in stock still.
Yeah. Well, look at the system was designed for mothers. I mean, if your mom can play it, anybody can play it. And that's just a perfect start. I mean, that's worked for so many other things. I mean, Lowe's is designed for women. Lowe's is a hardware store. It's a major hardware store. You walk into any Lowe's, it's got bright colors, huge signs. I mean,
not really talking about whether it was a good idea or a bad idea. Just saying that it was a risk for them because it was an unknown quantity.
Yeah.
I'd say there was a little risk there, but I think Nintendo's gotten to that point where they can take a little bit of a risk, especially looking at the fact that they were not going to make some sort of cutting.
Justifications for it and everything. I understand that, yeah.
I wanted to talk about the Jaguar.
Ooh, there was a weird one.
That was just a major flop, period. They had no third-party support. They came out at a time when they didn't really need to come out.
When did the Jaguar come out? Because that was that right around the PlayStation?
That was after the PlayStation, yeah.
Was it? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it was like a year or so after the PlayStation. And it was like, there wasn't even a void to really be filled. I think the Jaguar was just a waste of time. I think Atari wanted to do something to be out there and to try and become a major competitor, and I think they did it in every wrong way possible.
Well, the controller probably didn't help.
Ugh.
The fact that it was cartridge-based probably didn't help it either. I think, what was the price point on that? Does anyone remember?
I think that was like $400 when it came out. It was expensive initially.
Really?
And then they came out with the CD peripheral for that. It was like another
the toilet?
$199 or something. It was, or $149. I think it was $149. I would seem to remember. Because, I mean, I looked at the initial price of that, and I'm like, I got to spend this, and then I got to buy a CD add-on for it to get the really good games. And why didn't they just come out with a CD to start with? That's what I was saying about the timing. I think they rushed it. They didn't have any kind of support for it. They had a bad design for it initially.
So
they didn't have very good release games. I mean, Rise of the Robots is not going to sell your system.
We have to bring up Rise of the Robots every time we talk about Rise of the Robots. Take a shot.
That's Shigeru Miyamoto right there. I mean, one bad system can ruin a lot of things. I mean, one bad game can ruin an entire system, for that matter.
Okay, question specifically for Brian, but you can answer this too, John. Since Brian brought up that point of timing in games. So we've discussed that system timing has a lot to do with whether a system is a failure or not. What about technology? Say, for example, I think with the 3DO tried to do way too much with the state-of-the-art technology, and they just tried to be everything for everybody, and it ended up being nothing to no one. And I think the Jaguar, they tried to push all this technology, and there wasn't any way at that point to really utilize it properly. I guess the way I want to describe it, the analogy I want to use is, think of like when the Game Boy first came out and was still a black and white system, and Nintendo was very adamant about not going to a color screen, and so the Game Gear came out, the Lynx came out with these color screens, and then they failed, even though that they were color and technologically superior. Nintendo's thing was, well, the technology at this point is not conducive for holding, a color screen on for X amount of time. Let's wait until the technology gets better, and then, 5, 10 years later, we have the SP, the Game Boy SP, which is, a great color system. And
I think you knew that after you opened the back of the Lynx up and realized it took somewhere, but what was it, 6 or 8 AA batteries, and it only lasted about 4 to 6 hours.
But I mean, do you think technology has a lot to do with?
I think it has everything to do with it.
Push.
I think I think it works. I think it coexists. I think the companies push the technology because the need is there. People want to see color screens, so they find a way to bring a color screen there. They can't do it immediately, but once they figure out a way that's affordable, then we find a system come out that has that ability. And then that further drives the next system and so on. I don't think that...
So do you think they may have jumped the gun?
Well, when you're talking about technology and release time and price, you're really all talking about the same thing. I mean, it's when you release it determines what cost for the technology that you're putting in it and what's available. And those things are all related, and it seems like the best systems are really the ones that manage to balance all of those and come out with the best value at whatever that given time is.
Know your limitations.
Sony.
Yeah. Now, what about the PlayStation 3? Speaking about failed hardware. Even though it's not failed yet.
We don't know if it's failed yet. And
it's too soon.
There's so many questions about that.
We'll have to ask this question literally in a year. That's the only way to judge whether it's failed. Because it takes a year before a system really gets off the ground. And it's going to be a year
before the price drops.
Yeah, that too.
And they'll give them a year to work on it and try and make up some of the deficiencies. And there's also this whole weird thing with this generation that the product you buy is not necessarily the product you're even going to have in a year.
That's true.
We have
that is very true.
Updates and things that can change on your
the
console.
product you buy isn't always the product you think you're buying either, because it's half the time not obviously completed anymore. You have to get patches for it now, and I mean that used to be the thing with PC games, but at least PC games are completed when you got a copy of it, and then the things that completed as in we hope so. I rescinded that, but what I'm saying is, they could pop out a patch, and that was expected with a PC game, but you shouldn't have to expect that with a console game. I mean, that's where Nintendo does well, is they finish a game before they put it out.
That's like a penny arcade. It's like, what are you waiting for? Oh, I'm just playing a game. There's a black screen. The screen's all black. I've got to wait for the patch.
Yeah.
Well, it's not even patching problems, though. I mean, like this whole idea that with the 360, we got a software patch that enabled 1080p output on component cables. We got a hardware feature after the console was released without
having to buy something extra.
I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, we've kind of answered the question.
I do wonder one minor point about the TurboGrafx. Did it ever have a mascot like Mario or Sonic? It didn't seem like it had a franchise like that.
Bonk
was
probably the closest thing that it ever got to a mascot.
And that's only because that was the release game with the system, wasn't it? The original Bonk. Wasn't that the first pack-in?
No. Well, when the TurboGrafx 16 first came out, the pack-in game for it was Keith Courage and Alpha Zones.
Yeah.
Because the pack-in for the Super Nintendo was Super Mario World, and the Genesis originally was Altered Beast, and then it changed to Sonic the Hedgehog.
Rise from your grave.
I don't know if that does bring up an interesting point, though, John, with the mascot, and I'm wondering if there was just a lack of just brand identity with the TurboGrafx that may have just failed. It's just kids couldn't relate to it because it was just like this weird.
There's so many things about it that were weird that were not standard or common.
Yeah, and the TurboGrafx 16 is just a really bizarre system to begin with. It doesn't fit into anything, and it's just this.
It had a weird design. That's what I was saying. It was so weird looking, but it had so many innovations on it that people just were not seeing. Like it was one of the first systems that had a separate power unit. It literally was a brick like the Xbox 360 brick, but much smaller. And, I mean, it was completely separate from the unit. It was never going to overheat anything. I mean, that was a good design. That was initially a good design. The fact you could get 8 people on one system, that was pretty impressive. Play Bomberman on that thing. That was hilarious. But trying to get that many people to do it, and people that knew about the system and were willing to try it, and it was just such a weird thing. I think it was just bad timing.
I don't think it's bad timing. I think it had ideas that were ahead of its time, but people just weren't quite sure what to do with them.
Yeah, and I don't think even people making games for it were quite sure what to do with it.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on, we have some game reviews coming now. And our first game review is I will be doing a review quickly, because I know I talk too much when it comes to reviews. I've been told this.
I don't know. I thought you did really good that one time you did 3 reviews in 60 seconds. That was impressive.
Best reviews ever.
I'm not getting any respect anymore. I'm not even going to try.
Well, that was quality.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk about KOLDELKA, which is would you call this game obscure?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a very obscure
name sure is.
RPG. It's done by Saknoth, which is a company that a lot of people have not heard of. But the game company was started by Haruki Kikuta, which is the composer of such games as Secret of Mana. He did the music for that and a couple of other games. And he decided that he wanted to move over and create a company and make his own type of game. And this is where KOLDELKA came out. The problem with KOLDELKA, though, is that it wasn't well planned, and there was a lot of potential, but due to funds, due to just bad timing, bad coding, bad just everything, the game is kind of a half and half type of game where half the game there's some really good potential there and you can see it, but none of it's really executed, which is a shame because it had some real interesting storyline and some really interesting characters, but it just didn't seem to fit together all at once.
The gameplay was pretty unique, too.
Yeah, but the thing is, unique does not necessarily mean good.
Well, that's true.
The way the gameplay worked was that it was like a turn-based RPG. The thing is, though, that you were on a grid system, so you had to move your characters either close or far to the enemy. Think like Shining Force or
it's a
Fire
strategy
Emblem.
RPG.
Yeah, it's a strategy RPG.
Tactics.
But you had random battles, like on RPG, except that each battle would take place on a grid, and you would end up playing that grid like an action RPG. The problem with that, though, is that it really messed with the flow of the game. And the battles would take a long time. I mean, really hideously long periods of time. And not only that, but when you're not battling, the other part of the game feels almost like a survival horror game.
Well, even the combat was definitely a survival horror.
Yeah.
It kind of was a crossbreed of a strategy RPG and survival horror because they limited all the items that you got. I mean, your main character starts the game with a pistol with 6 bullets.
Yeah, and it was just a really strange mix of like they took elements of this type of game they liked, and they took elements of this type of game they like, and tried to mix them together, and it had a lot of potential, but it didn't quite meld. And it's just a really bizarre mix of just styles and ideas that could have been but never were.
I wouldn't say never were. It certainly went on to inspire some excellent RPGs.
Well, yeah, that is true. I mean, it is the prequel to the Shadow Hearts series, Shadow Hearts Covenant, and Shadow Hearts A New World. But it's a really just bizarre mix of just everything, and it doesn't fit. Although I will say that I really liked the story. The characters were actually really interesting. Being a survival horror style game, there were some scary moments in the game, nothing that would make me jump out of my seat, but there were some intense moments in the game.
It was pretty scary to run out of ammo and magic.
Well, which happened a lot, actually. but I think the pacing wasn't there. The flow of the game, very disjointed. Although graphically, I will say that it was really good at the time that it was made. And at least from a graphical and musical standpoint, it still does hold up. Just the gameplay is just really off. I wouldn't recommend the game unless you're looking for like that obscure RPG that, I don't know, this game's just really hard to recommend to just.
If you want to play this one, you probably already know you want to play this one.
Yeah. I will say this, the main character, KOLDELKA, is supremely hot. I will just say that right now.
That makes it all better then.
Well, yeah. Well,
Everybody should buy this game. We should all own it now. Pick it up at the same time you're picking up Extreme Beach Volleyball 2.
No. You're probably better off with KOLDELKA, actually. But I think I bought this game originally. God, I probably bought it I think I bought it when it was used for $19.99. It's a 4-disc RPG. And I think it's still worth $19.99, but I wouldn't pay much more for that. I think it's nice if you're a collector. I think it's a nice niche title to have just for something that's just really off the wall and different. But for anyone who just plays casual, RPGs like Final Fantasy and stuff, it's really one to just kind of avoid if you're not one to, if you're wanting to play it, because it might frustrate you a little. I mean, you've played the game, right, John?
Yeah, though I have not beaten it.
It is a hard game, though.
Especially because it does not play like an RPG, which is, I think, what you expect when you first sit down and start playing it.
Yeah.
The whole bit that they really do make it hard to find health power-ups and save points and are just brutal about where they place that stuff.
I will also like to add that it does have the best item that you use to resurrect a fallen opponent, which is, was it a bottle of whiskey?
I believe so.
Yeah,
yes.
It is a bottle of whiskey. So, yeah, Phoenix down, nothing, just,
Shot of Jack.
Yeah, shot of Jack. So, next up, we have John doing a game that's very hard to pronounce.
I'm reviewing a PSP import called KURUKURU CHAMELEON, which I'm sure I've got entirely too many R's in there.
No, it looks right.
That's supposed to sound more L-ish. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll work with it.
Okay. This is a puzzle game, which from the PSP game is definitely an arcade port. Picked this one up from Play Asia. Got the Asia version for dirt cheap, which is why I decided to give it a try. Fortunately, it's a straightforward puzzle game, and very nicely it came with an insert in the rules with an English translation for all the game modes. The game takes place on a hex grid, and you start in control of one of the hexes, and your opponent is on the other. And each turn you have the ability to choose a color to change to. And whatever color you change to, you will then gain control of all of the hexes that are adjacent to the territory that you own of that color. And the goal of the standard game mode is to gain control of more than 50% of the board. That's straightforward. The bit of complexity on top of it makes it a little more interesting is that you can't change color to the same color that either you are currently or your opponent is. And there's a few terrain features on the board. Each character also has a special ability which allows them to do various weird things on the board. As puzzle games go, I don't think it's brilliant. It's fun, but not as addictive as a classic like Tetris or Lumines is. It does, however, have some very nice multiplayer modes for it that you can play in game sharing mode with the wireless, which is always a feature, especially when you're buying a strange import game where your friends aren't going to have a copy. But it suffers because it's such a direct arcade port. It has no way to save your progress. Doesn't even have a leaderboard or a way to save the options that you set, so you have to go in and change that every time. There's also a DS version of this. I would expect it to be nearly identical. Might get to tap on which color you want instead, but the game just isn't complicated enough for them to add much on top of it. I paid about $15 for this one, and really, as simple as it is, I wouldn't pay more than $10. Checking on GameFAQs, looks like there was supposed to be a European version coming out at the end of 2006, but I don't know that actually happened, and I can find no listings for the game itself, so I'd be inclined to believe that it didn't, which is probably unfortunate, because it would have been nice to see an English translation of it, if for no other reason to find out what the hell those characters are yelling at me every time I pick a color. Looks like that won't happen, though.
Now, how similar is this to Brian's puzzle game, Honeycomb Beat, that he picked up?
Oh, it's nothing like that, since it's trying to capture territory instead of making rows, and since it's fundamentally competitive with either an AI or another player. I don't think I'd call it the same at all.
Okay. All right. Brian, you have a review for us, or no? Okay.
It's so late anyways, so
all right.
Just cut it down.
All right. Yeah, you look like you're getting tired anyway. You've been doing inventory again?
No, not until Sunday.
Oh, my God. Man, they need to do something, man. They need, like, to put RFID tags in bread or something like that.
Crunchy ones.
There's got to be an easier way to do that,
Shiva
man.
just came out with one that's half a size. I think it's half a millimeter. You can stick in
They
things.
just put it in the crusty part.
Yeah, you'll never know it. You walk
Extra
around
iron.
with like RFIDs in your stomach and
It's small enough they'll pass
Yeah.
through. Not a big deal.
soiling greens.
Man.
If it made your life easier, though, I'd still vote for that one.
Hey man, gotta be
Man.
an easier way.
You're preaching to the choir, man. I'll have to tell you some of the horror stories at my work. What? You mean to tell me that if it's not in the contract I signed, I'm not going to get it? Well, the contract a contract is a legally binding document.
All that legal stuff you had to scroll through.
Yeah,
before you
just
signed,
because the
or-
promotion is written on a piece of paper does not mean you'll get it.
You guys use
It
a
has
bunch
to
of
be
wacky,
in a contract.
You guys use a bunch of wacky acronyms too, like is your legal binding contract the LBD?
Nah. No, we just say, yeah, you sign this. Sure, take it to court. See if we care. Oh, yeah, by the way, it'll hold up in court because it's a legal binding document.
And because who's going to sue over their phone bill?
You'd be surprised.
Well, you gotta see some of the prices on. You got like $1 million contract, yeah.
No, we're talking like in the 300 million contracts.
Well, then I might get excitable about it.
Well,
You'd hope those people would read the
no,
contract.
well, no,
first,
these are the people that have like, $5,000 disputes, and I'm like, dude, a lawyer costs more than that, like a day. If you're, you might want to check your finances here, because if you're arguing for $5,000 and it's costing you like X amount of dollars for an attorney, you might want to rethink that plan. All right, so that is it for the podcast. Steve should be back with us next time, and
Will he be back with wacky sound effects?
he will probably be back with no game reviews.
I don't know. He's got a 360 now.
That doesn't mean anything.
And what has he been playing?
Gears.
Yeah, I think he's been playing just Gears of War.
I see him on playing Gears.
Yeah,
I might have picked up Dead Rising, who knows?
Oh.
But the only 2 games I've picked up.
All right. So that is it. Thank you for listening to Diehard Gamer Radio. And we will have another show for you hopefully real soon.
Thank you for listening to Diehard Gamer Radio. You can visit our website at diehardgamerradio.com and iTunes, or you can email us at diehardgamerradio@gmail.com.